Reggie Haven's Lives in the Balance here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Today, we're talking about the major protests that will be taking place in Los Angeles and around the world. Today, May Day, historic day. One of the biggest rallies right here in Los Angeles. 2 years ago, over 1 million people took to the streets and participated in what was called the Great American Boycott. In 2007, the May Day rallies for comprehensive immigration reform continued, but were marred by incidents of violence, with the Los Angeles Police Department firing rubber bullets at protesters in MacArthur Park. This year, the LAPD claims to have prepared more restrained tactics that include the use of an electronic device flashing crowd control warnings in English, in Spanish, in Mandarin, and Korean. To discuss today's events and the state of the immigrants' rights movement, we're joined by Annika Torse of the communications of CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles, joining us here in Los Angeles. Welcome.
Thank you.
Talk about the protest plan today and what happened in the past.
Well, I will say today we're expecting a very exciting day, about a minimum of 25,000 people and upwards. We have marches that are coming from 2 points in Los Angeles and will converge together at one point at 5th and Broadway. One group is going to be starting over at MacArthur Park. Another is going to be starting over at 1st and Broadway. And we also have a whole group. We have about 4,000 workers coming from the factory American Apparel. It should be extremely exciting.
Why American Apparel?
Well, the American Apparel, I'm probably aware that Dov Charney, the owner, has a big Legalize LA campaign. He's been a big proponent of immigration reform for many years, and he is actually going to be paying all of his workers today to actually get out there and march. So it should be quite something.
And what is happening so last year isn't repeated when the police moved in on the protesters at MacArthur Park?
Well, I actually was there last year, and it was very scary and very disturbing and shocking for everyone. The police has made repeated claims that there are systems in place, communication in place between the NGOs and between the police to make sure that such a thing doesn't happen again. Describe
what happened.
Well, there was the march. The march was a peaceful march, and then at the end of the march, there was a rally in MacArthur Park. It was a big sign of unity. Lots of families, lots of community, vendors, music, and then there was a small group of people that started kind of taunting the police. And when I say small, I mean very small. I think it was a maximum of 14 young people, and I think it started with just a few kids, and these were teenagers, and they were literally just kind of making comments back and forth and just sort of, yelling things at the police, and the police were not really doing anything about this. The organizers approached the police and asked them why not, separate this small group, isolate them, because they're disturbing everybody else that's having this peaceful event. And at the same time, there were speakers. As I was saying before, there was music, so there were a lot of people that weren't even aware of this small group. But the police kind of continued to be quiet. Then there was back and forth interim on walkie-talkies. That is where I understood the breakdown in communication had happened. And then suddenly, there were rubber bullets flying. There was there was an announcement of, I believe it was, it was tear gas. There was an announcement that everybody needed to disperse, but it didn't come until after all of these things had already happened, meaning until the bullets were already, going. And then there was people where the police was dressed in riot gear. They were in a long row, and they were moving towards the group, and it was really terrifying. Then suddenly there was a mad scramble, and what was most scary, to be honest, was to see the families. There were particularly mothers that were looking for kids very quickly, or siblings looking for each other. I mean, organizers were organizers, so we were clear about what to do, which was really to get things together and to get going.
And, of course, the journalists who were attacked at the time. Those images are very famous because the police moved in. They were knocking down reporters, camera people.
Yes, I'm very glad you brought that up. I think something to also point out is that that's largely why this demonstration got so much attention, because there was media that was being attacked. And clearly, how can you blame the media out there just for doing their job? It is important, of course, to underscore that it was equally horrific to see all of these families that were being attacked as well, and just peaceful community members.
What are you calling for today?
We're calling for unity. We're calling for an end to all of the raids. I know that you just discussed the raids that have been happening throughout the city and throughout the nation. We're calling for an end of unfair labor practices, such as the use of this, using the faulty Social Security database system to determine immigration status. Primarily, we're looking to see that when the next presidential regime comes in, that there is a change in humane immigration reform. All of these kinds of current tactics, including the raids, which is probably the most horrifying because it gets down to separation of families, and as you just heard, the infringement of human rights violations for all people, including citizens. These kinds of systems, they don't do anything. They don't fix our problem. They don't solve anything for the 13+ million people that are dealing with undocumented status. They're already here. They don't solve the issues with our economy. In fact, things like this with the raids, they make our economy worse. And we want to make sure that when a new president comes in, that there's immigration reform is passed in the first 100 days.
Will the mayor, Villaraigosa, be marching with you?
The mayor will be there, and he will be marching with us, yes.
I want to thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Our guest, Anike Torse, Communications Director of CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. As we move on now to another protest, as tensions rise here on the West Coast between dock workers and their employers group, the Pacific Maritime Association. The International Longshore and Warehouse Union has been organizing to shut down ports on the West Coast today, May Day, to protest the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But yesterday, an arbitrator ordered the union to tell its members they must report to work today. Meanwhile, dock workers in Iraq have announced plans to shut down the ports of Qasr and Khor al-Zubair for 1 hour today to show solidarity with U.S. workers. We're joined on the phone right now by Clarence Thomas, Executive Board Member of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, ILWU, Local 10, a member of U.S. Labor Against the War. So what are your plans today after this arbitrator made the announcement yesterday?
Well, good morning, Amy, and thanks for having me on the show. I just want to say that longshoremen are not slaves. We can take a day off. And this action that we are taking has emanated from a decision made by our rank and file at our Longshore Caucus. Our Longshore Caucus is the highest ruling body of the Longshore Division, and we are calling for a call to conscience so that our workers can take a position against the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. These are our children, Amy, that are being killed. And if we are silent, then we are complicit with the George Bush administration in the killing of our children. We believe that this action is important because we are taking this action in the name of millions of workers in this country who would love to do what we're doing, but because of their circumstances cannot. We also want to let you know that the truckers, the independent truckers, many of whom are immigrant workers, will also be acting in solidarity. In New Jersey, port truckers will not be working in the ports of Newark and Elizabeth, as well as the ports of Houston in the Gulf. So this movement is growing, and this is not just an action taken by the ILWU. We have a Port Workers May Day Organizing Committee, which is made up of various trade unionists here in the Bay Area, as well as anti-war activists and social justice activists.
So you will defy the arbitrator and his order to the union saying that the union should tell the workers to go to work today?
Well, Amy, you know, the great Harry Bridges, who was one of the founding members of our organization, once said that the rank and file does what it has to, and it's up to the lawyers on how to get us out of it. That's what we pay them for. What that translates into is this. The ILWU was born in struggle. And the threat of lawsuits and other kinds of actions by the arbitrator, even though they are in effect, workers have a right to take off. So we're not bound to go to work simply because of the fact that the arbitrator says so.
Well, I want to thank you, Clarence
believe
Thomas,
that
for
this
joining
action
us, the
today-
Executive Board Member of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, ILWU, Local 10, a member of U.S. Labor Against the War. And as we go into this break and then come back and speak to the Reverend Jesse Jackson, riot police in Turkey have clashed with labor activists trying to gather in Istanbul's Taksim Square to celebrate May Day. Our TV viewers are seeing the footage, and for our radio listeners, you can look at it at democracynow.org. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.